Compound interest, managing your farmland like the long-term investment that it is. That's what I'm talking about with the guys from Calibrated Agronomy in this awesome episode of Calibrate Your Agronomy. Hey there, let's just cut to the chase. Most farmers' most valuable asset that they have in their entire portfolio is the land that they farm. And there's also usually a family and a legacy aspect and component to being a farmer. I want to leave this ground better than I left it. Really? Your practices don't actually prove that. I'm not being mean, I'm being honest. My favorite story, my friend Mike Evans and I were looking at driving through Iowa, and it was in the springtime. I looked over and said, the guy that farms that ground thinks the reason that all of his field is washed into the ditch is because he had a wet spring. Never thought about the fact that it was actually his practices. The point is there are things you can do to improve your asset for your own benefit and for your offspring's benefit. These guys are going to tell you how to look at your farm ground like the long-term investment that it is. And by the way, some of the results don't take 20 or 30 or 50 years like an annuity, an IRA or something like that. It can happen in a few years. Mr. Evans, talk to me about what you started doing there at Garrett Land and Cattle, just by some small changes. Maybe it didn't give you a big, huge bump in year one, but even by year 3, 4, 5, you're seeing some pretty big results.
Yeah, I mean, I really went into discussions Kelly and I had about the long-term future of the farm and where he wanted to go. I mean, really, he's looking down the road for his sons to take it over, and where does he want to leave it at? So, we looked at where he was at that point in time, how things were getting managed, looked at the marketplace for the commodities, and then looked at where we wanted to go and laid out a plan. So, one of the big things we always talk about was residue management. And first, that was just we added a mechanical piece to the corn head called a devastator to handle the residue and size it better. Well, then working with Jared and Clint, we started talking about biology and soil biology and getting that system honed in. And once we get that in a better place, then that starts compounding on top of our other residue management structures. So we looked at it a holistic approach is what we tried to do, and tried to take steps towards that, and didn't try to do it 1 year. We knew we couldn't do it in 1 year, but we wanted to start implementing management steps throughout 3, 4, 5 years.
Jared Cook, Idaho-based agronomist. Talk about the long-term investment side of this. How long are we talking about? And obviously, it's different soil to soil, et cetera, and humans are impatient. That's part of what we all are. It's probably a little bit tougher sell. You're out there giving advice, and you say, listen, you may not see a result in year 1, maybe not even in year 3. I can see a lot of people saying, I don't have time for that.
I think the challenge, Damien, is it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're wanting to build organic matter, honestly, I've seen some improvements in 1 year. But the thing is, you have to measure it in order to validate that you actually are on the right track.
Right.
And that was the biggest lesson learned. We found that we couldn't necessarily improve overall organic matter percentage, but we could improve water-soluble organic carbon. But the best way we did that was by measuring, deploy a strategy, remeasure, deploy another strategy, remeasure, and validate what our progress looked like. And so whatever you're trying to accomplish, I think you have to set benchmarks of management in place so you can monitor and measure. Otherwise, you'll miss the change.
If I need payback, I think if I'm in your role, Clint Freeze, you tell me. If I'm in your role as an agronomist who also farms, I'm going to go in and say, hey, I can help you. Here's the result we'll see. The first one and the second one. So then it's all of a sudden you can start seeing progress, because if I can start seeing progress, it's hard for anybody to say, yeah, keep putting this money away and somewhere 40 years from now, it'll pay off. It's hard for people to be that patient.
It is. And, I look at both of my grandpas that both farmed, and they always had the ideology, I want to leave the ground better than I found it. And I think as we become more educated and there's more information about agriculture and soil biology and plant physiology, we're understanding more things, that there's more things we can do to leave the ground better than we found it. So, I think we're very much focused on, where our fertility curves are, how efficient can we be. We start to put in learning strips to figure that out, incorporating the soil biology. A lot of our customers locally, been on a soil biology path for 5-6 years. They can have a 2-3 foot tall cover crop and that it's gone in six weeks after they desiccate it or kill it. That's a very active system. So they start to see results, but it's not always year one. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a culture shift when you start to go down this road.
I like that you can talk about soil biology. My favorite thing, Evans, is you've never made me go out and bury a pair of underwear in the fence row. I swear to God, when people start doing this, and it's all over social media every spring, we're going to prove how soil biology, we're going to bury a pair of underwear. Like, who came up with this? I mean, it's like, who came up with this idea? Does it bother you as much as it bothers me?
Yeah, it does.
All right, somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to say, I'm not mining my soil. I've got a long-term approach. I applied dry fertility like crazy. And I remember when I was younger, before I met people like you that were smart agronomically, I thought that was the right thing to do. I thought, yep, I'm going to leave this ground better than I found it. I'm just going to go out and over-apply dry fertility. And now I've learned from guys like you, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, case in point, when my grandpa wanted to retire when I was 20. I took over the farm management, and of course I had all the best ideas, and so we went down many roads. I went down we just poured the fertility to everything. 2x rates and grow some great crops on the right year. But it was after a while we started to put in check strips with lower rates or no rate. Yield never changed. And it got me thinking, well, there's a lot more going on here. So we've kind of been on a path, all of us collectively, separately, but now together, learning those curves, Damian, where we can get what we can get away with in a year where there's very little profitability in farming, and then how we can strategize and use different management practices, use different products to gain us ground in the long-term efficiency of our soil, and how we can produce healthier crops that ultimately lead to more nutrient dense crops. We're starting to get into a whole nother area of learning on when we get the biology right, we get our nutrition right, what the secondary benefits are.
Wasn't that one of the big objectives on the stuff you started experimenting with a few years ago, Mr. Evans?
Yeah. I mean, my background in ag retail and coming out in this industry was, we always spent a lot of time dry fertilizer, P&K, get those up, and it really helped us back then. But as we've gained knowledge, the soil is more than just fertility. It's the chemistry, the physical aspect, and the biological aspect, and they all got to work in tune to be productive. And when you get those things all kind of working and balanced out, they don't take as much fertility as you once thought was to raise a pretty decent crop on a smaller budget per se. So, I think that's what we've seen, where we're headed, and it doesn't happen overnight. Some fields are quicker than others, and some fields, they take a little bit longer, just the nature of the beast, but it's staying on the path.
Back to the thing about flinging out lots of dry fertility, Mr. Cook. Is it ill-advised because it doesn't have staying power? I mean, in other words, now what we know, and like Clint talked about biology and whatnot, are we the old days you just said, okay, go out and catch up. It's been mined. That ground's been mined. And I think we're learning that don't work. But you tell me, you're the one if I'm looking at my ground's long-term investment, I'd say, what's wrong with putting on a lot of fertilizer? And you'd say?
I'd say it depends on the crop you're growing. Let's consider potato crop, for example. There's high investment. I mean, you have to produce yield. You have to produce quality. You get thousands of dollars of invested cost. So we tend to over fertilize NPK for that specific crop because we have to have the ROI. But you get into a cereal grain following the potato crop or a sugar beet crop, you can usually use that as a way to mine or harvest your over application in the cash crop, the potato game. But I think it's crop dependent, but I don't think it's sustainable long term to be doing these high rates. I don't know why we don't put more emphasis on, let's build our organic matter 1%. If we can increase organic matter 1%, that's 40, 50 pounds of N, that's 40, 50 pounds of phosphorus, that's extra potassium just by increasing organic matter. So that's a natural gain we can occur just by focusing on organic matter building.
By the way, there's a reason why people don't focus on organic matter building, because there's people that are your competitors. I saw one of these pinheads talk at an ag conference 10 years ago that stood in front of an audience. I was a speaker. I was watching him. I was after him. He said, it's impossible to build organic matter in our lifetime on your farming operation. And he was like one of these high yield, allegedly consulting agronomy speaker guys. I think that I thought it was wrong then. And I know it's wrong now, right?
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, I've personally seen it in my career, 17 years in this business. I've got a number of farms that have taken just raw organic matter, looking at plant debris in the soil where we typically run 1.5% to 2%. We're ranging 3.5%, 4% in 5-6 years. But the more impressive numbers, I've got a number of producers that have taken their organic, water-soluble organic carbon from 80 parts per million, clear on up, we're knocking on the door of 250 to 270 parts per million.
Hey, Evans, he just did that thing. He always does this. He's subtle. He makes it clear that he's smarter than me. I have no idea why water-soluble carbon matters. Why does that matter? Is someone going to answer that? All right.
Well,
Water soluble. I asked Evans, and Evans just looked at me. He likes it when Jared kind of subtly makes me look dumb.
Yeah.
Right, what the hell's water soluble carbon mean? What's that mean?
That's the engine of the soil.
Okay.
That's what drives all biological processes forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you talked about, you've seen it make a 3 to 4 times increase?
Yeah, 80 to 250 in just a few years. I mean, it's been incredible seeing what kind of performance that's brought to the crop.
How did that go about? How'd you do that?
Just mostly nitrogen management. The overuse of nitrogen will burn out your soluble carbon in the soil faster than any other strategy.
Yep.
So deploying the right carbon nitrogen ratio products, cover crops, compost use, biological inputs. BioAg's been pretty incredible in bringing an improved water-soluble carbon fraction to the soil.
All right, so use your product called BioE, but what else did you talk about? You said, reduction of nitrogen? Because over-application of nitrogen reduces the water-soluble carbon?
Primarily nitrate, reduction in nitrate nitrogen, because it has such a carbon demand. So we use forms like amine nitrogen, we use ammonium. If we do make a nitrate application, like with UAN, we'll stack backbone in there at 1 to 2 ounces per unit of nitrogen to balance that seed-in ratio. If you can deliver a balanced seed-in ratio, the soil doesn't have to compensate. You just let it rip, and that maintains what's in the soil.
Clint, long-term investing and mindset to succeed over a long period. I want to get into that. Before I do, I look at this as a short-term interest versus an annuity mindset. If I do things right now, then 10 years from now, I get like a payback, right? And that's where I think we're talking about you can reduce fertility, et cetera, et cetera. This is a hard one to sell, though, because, again, it's boring. It's boring what you're talking about, right? It's not sexy.
Well, I don't know. If you like making money, I think that's sexy, but I guess where I'm at with it, Damien, is the farmers that we get to work with that meet us halfway and are willing to put in a little bit of work and testing. I've worked with a lot of companies, and one thing I've heard a lot from a lot of companies is, well, you're going to take a yield hit for 8 to 10 years while we repair your soil, but then everything is going to come back. And that is not our philosophy at Calibrated Agronomy. We better be producing yield for our clients while making this transition. And I think we're doing that very successfully as we implement some of these things. And it's not really hard. I mean, at the end of the day, we're transitioning away from big loads in one shot of nutrition to more balanced bite-sized chunks. We're starting to focus on what the plant's telling us by biology and educating farmers about how, when we get biology right, how it does compound interest into plant health, which is a reduction in fungicide in certain years. And it's a reduction in some of our fertility inputs. And we can measure those things now that when I started this game 8 years ago, there was no way to measure it. And to Jared's point, measuring it, getting a benchmark where we're at, deploying a strategy, measuring it, seeing the yield come along with it. To me, that's where it's all at. It's just putting all the pieces together.
One of our past recordings, we did the thing with the guy that was a little bit controversial, Mr. Evans. He said, healthy plants don't require pesticides. And that gets a lot of people shook up, right? This is kind of the same thing, because it wasn't, you're not going to change it immediately. But his point was, if you do this right, you're continually making a healthier plant. You're making a healthier plant by making your soil healthier, on and on and on and on. I get the concept. Like I said, I think that there's going to be people that say, well, this takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, whatever. Okay, fine. So my question to you would be, what's the first step? What's the first thing you tell people? One of your clients gets a hold of you and says, hey, I want Calibrated Agronomy to help me start managing my soil for the long term better than I am right now. What do you tell them?
Evaluate where you're at, and then don't try to chew off a bunch of stuff at once. Take 2-3 things, let's go implement them. And like Jared and Clint have said, and measure them. Try to break it off in segments. Take Kelly's operations, an easy one for us. We actually had a large grower here a couple of weeks ago come down and visit us, look at the residue, because he wanted to start doing more no-till corn on corn, and wanted to see what we're doing and how we're handling things. And we walked fields and we showed him, like, here's a farm that's been in the program for 5 years. Here's the residue. Here's the corn stand. Here's a farm that's probably halfway down that. And here's one we're starting to implement it. And we can look at the differences, and you can see that transition over time, of the few things we implement along the way. And he was fairly impressed. I mean, he's just like, yeah, I could see the vision here. So bite it off in small chunks and then implement some steps and get after it.
Jared Cook, you're in a different part of the world. Things are different out there. I'm in the Midwest. I go to the Farm Progress Show. You know what they don't do? They don't demo cover crops. They don't bury underwear in fence rows. That's a good thing. They don't talk about reducing the tillage, because you know what? The people at the Farm Progress Show want to see big equipment, tractors and pieces of equipment that are the size of your house, going out and just tearing the hell out of things. That's what they like to show. Seems to me that one of the first things you would tell somebody if they want to view their soil for the long-term investment that it is to reduce tillage, because I've heard that is the quickest way to help organic matter increases, obviously keep soil structure, etc. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But then again, I live in a culture out here in Idaho where, we grow vegetables, potatoes. We deploy a lot of tillage to make a successful potato crop. We haven't figured out how to no-till potatoes yet. And so I think it's geography specific, but in the Corn Belt, I don't see why you couldn't accomplish no-till corn or no-till beans, no-till wheat in just about every scenario possible. And I think it would have massive improvements for the long term, in that geography. But again, it's geography specific. So
Clint, when you go to the Farm Progress Show, don't you think that most of those people are they get really excited? I mean, if you could bring in a piece of farm equipment the size of the Goodyear blimp, those dudes, they'd stand there and gawk at it all day. They get really excited about big piece of equipment.
Yeah, everybody loves iron, and I think it's part of the thing from a kid on. It's kind of, you want to get in that tractor, you want to have the newest tillage tool.
It's
whatever.
Farm porn. Admit what it is, Clint.
It's what it is. It's farm porn. Yep. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, it depending on the operation, if you're covering a ton of acres, having new equipment may be the best bet for your operation. But for a lot of operations, I think there's a lot of money can go other places for a better ROI.
So one of your Midwest, you're an Illinois guy, I'm an Indiana guy, Evans is an Iowa guy. Is one of your first recommendations when people call up and say, hey, you're the Calibrated Agronomy guy, I want to get better, I want to treat my soil better. Do you tell them you're probably tilling too much?
I do, but I'm careful because, we're flat here. And so, we go from hill ground, nothing like Evans deals with out of Kelly's, but we go from highly eroded ground where we used to, when we tilled all the time, we brought a dozer in there spring and fall before we farmed to push dirt back uphill. We've implemented cover crop strategies on that, figured it out to where it's not a reduction in yield in our wet soils. Haven't had a dozer on the farm in 5-6 years. So there's other fields that have terrible poor drainage that's flat that I'm going to be more reluctant to push that day one until we get some baselines going. And so that's one of the good parts of working with this is we've all tried a lot of things and can maybe tell you where the best place to start is, where you should tiptoe in, as Evan said, and where you should be a little reluctant to transition some of those.
All right, Mike Evans, give me the rest of the chronology. Thank you, Clint. The rest of the chronology. All right, analysis first off. Client comes to you and says, all right, I'm buying into this long-term thing. I want to leave this ground better than I got it. Analysis. What are you doing? What do you think you're doing wrong? Okay. Where do you have your biggest problem? And then you said maybe recommend a reduction in tillage. And then what's the next thing I need to do?
I mean, next thing to do is go implement it and follow it along and follow through. I think that's human nature at times, is you try something and that didn't work, or it didn't go out, the outcome you expected didn't happen, probably. It becomes a little psychological at the end, and you're just like, well, that didn't work, so I'm not going to try it again. And it's just human nature. See it a lot in our society today, but I think there's always a learning point, no matter if it worked or it didn't or what. And it gets frustrating at times. We talk about it within amongst ourselves on certain things, but there's always something to be learned when you get through that path and get through the end, and finish it out and see where you're at and try to learn and move on and continue down it, and not just try to one hit wonder it. In my mind, we've done a lot of things on Kelly's farm specifically. They didn't work out the first time we tried it, and it was very frustrating, and we scratched our heads, but we tried it one, maybe two more times, and then we had the light bulb moment. It's like, oh, okay, that's making sense now. And it's just little tweaks here and there. So it's really comes down to mindset and changing your thought process.
So the person that wants to be the long-term investor here, Jared, is going to say, okay, what are my green shoots? You said water-soluble carbon is an early win. What else am I looking at early on that gives me hope? Remember, if I start going to the gym and after 2 weeks I already sleep better, and then after 4 weeks I don't squint to get out of the car, I don't make noises getting in and out of the car. If I can start seeing progress, then I can stick with it. What are the things that I'm going to look at early on?
Leon, I think next to carbon is the pathogen load of your soil. I think there's immediate return on investment by reducing the pathogen load that could exist in soils. We've seen it all the time, with Mike and Clint, and the amount of biological assay testing that they've done, with these genomic tests. We've seen tremendous amount of Rhizoctonia, Fusarium, Pythium, Phytophthora. I mean, lots and lots of disease. So to me, that's number one or two. There might be a close tie between carbon and the pathogen load.
Okay, so pathogen reduction and carbon, and so carbon loads and pathogen decreases are early on. Then organic matter is going to be more of a 5 to 10 year type of a window. About water holding capacity, or can I measure biology? Can I start seeing that stuff in the first few years?
You see it all in the first few years. In fact, think about this, a lot of pathogens that exist in the soil system today because there's not enough natural competition from the indigenous biology that's in the soil. So we take a product like BioAg-E, deploy it at a known rate. That induces what we call competitive exclusion. It goes and antagonizes the pathogen. It builds organic matter. It reorganizes soil structure.
Evans, when do I get to where the guy that was on our episode, we talked about healthy plants, healthy soils, don't need as much inputs. When do I start to see that? Are you seeing that now at Garrett Land and Cattle? Because one of the goals you started a few years ago with cover cropping and nutrient adherence to nutrient analysis, all that. Are you to the point now where you can cut back on the spend because turns out your plants are healthier?
Yeah, they're more efficient farms, I would say. To the point of disease, they tend to be the farms we worry about less of fungicide applications. The plants are healthier. A couple of years ago, where it wasn't as a heavy disease environment, we pulled fungicide on a lot of farms because they were a lot healthier, and the plants were doing a lot better. So we saved some money there and put it towards fertility. So, yeah, we do see benefits from that holistic approach.
All right. If someone comes to you and sits down and they're a bad investor, every time the market goes down, they sell. And then when things are rolling, they go up, all the typical investment mistakes. Now let's extrapolate that. If we're looking at the farm ground and saying compound interest, stay in it for the long haul, have a degree of patience, pretend that person's coming and sitting at your desk. Instead of being the financial advisor, you're the farm advisor, and you're telling them, here's the mistakes you're making right now that are harming your long-term investment of your soil. Jared or Clint, you go first. What do you tell them they're doing wrong?
Well, I always tend to like them to start small. I'd like them to look at our way of doing things for a 3-year period on a smaller acre portion. If they're very skeptical, then go jump all in. So, the great thing about this group is we put together a massive data set where we can show the rise in organic matter. We can show the reduction in pathogens. We can help implement what you need to come in and spend not that much money on validating where you're at today. And then we can put a game plan on how we get better in the future. And, I think the hardest thing for me though, we get so used, farmers in general, they get so used to doing something a certain way. Yeah. We'll make a recommendation on what we think they should do, and they won't do it. They'll keep their base rate fertility at the same place they always had, and then try to stack what we're doing on top of it, and we overspend on them. So, just having a little faith and starting small on some small acres and seeing it for yourself is big for me. So it seems to be where I'm winning.
Garrett.
I think you got to take the doctor-patient approach. Tell us where it hurts. What are your struggles? What are your frustrations? Put all the product discussion on the back burners and let's talk pure agronomy. Let's talk about what the frustrations are. What field is poor yielder that constantly drags the average down? Dive into the details so you can make good, sound agronomic recommendations and then deploy the products. I think that's the approach I'd take.
Mike Evans, here's the thing. I think that most farmers already think they are taking a long-term approach and already do think they're doing everything right. And now you got to be in this unenviable position of telling them, no, you're not. How's that go? How's that go over?
Oh, I think we're just coming from a different perspective in the long term. Most everybody is thinking down the road on their farming operation. We're just trying to take a different path of let's look at it a different way. We got tools to measure it in a different way that we feel like that provide us a lot better information to get to us to the end game that we're trying to get to. And, a lot of guys who come and say they got some heartburn, like Jared said, we met some guys in Northeast Nebraska, that yields are going backwards. They're a little frustrated, we walk their fields and, it's residue management out there was there, they weren't really thinking about it. Nobody was telling them about it. Nobody was explaining anything to them. And they were just looking.
They had too much residue at creating pathogen problems?
It wasn't breaking down.
Oh.
It was just trash out there. And we just started to talk to them and did some presentations, and some of the things stuck with them. And that's kind of been the start process with them. I think that piece is very important in understanding what, like Jared said, the heartburn, and then analyzing what's going on.
Clint, I'll leave it with you. Since you joined us,
yeah.
Well, we're glad you did.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
When you look at the thing that you think, man, I'm really glad I did this. What's the thing that you look back and say, all right, I was 20, I made some mistakes. I'm really glad I did this because I can already see the long-term investment and it's paying me back dividends every year?
I think it was my mindset, and being...
It wasn't a product. It wasn't a product you started using. It wasn't a practice change. It was a mental shift.
It was a mental shift. It was, going to all the standard ag meetings. That's I didn't go to college. So I basically would travel all winter and go to meetings, agronomy meetings, and always have loved agronomy, but you kind of hear the same thing over and over. And so when we started thinking outside the box, we did some questionable things for sure. But I've learned so much from it by realizing, hey, I'm not going to completely, fail at a crop because I pulled my phosphorus back for 1 year, or, that mental shift for me is huge. And just being willing to open and understand and realize the world of advanced agronomy, there is so many variables and so much going on. To me, that's where it's at, Tammy.
All right. I said he was going to be the last one. We're going to stick with the same topic. One big thing that you think you changed just since you started working with Kelly Evans, one thing that you're like, yeah, I can tell you what, we saw the payback on this. Maybe not at first, but my God, look at it now. I'm really glad we did this. Mindset for him. What was it for you?
I think the big thing for us was we were, spreading. Well, when we first started, we was strip banding potash, with his anhydrous. Very equipment heavy, very time consuming.
Yep.
And we did some research and we axed it, used those dollars elsewhere, and started down this approach of residue management and helping with breaking all that residue down.
Yeah. And it's changed all the components of your soil. The biology is probably better, and obviously you're not compacting the soil. You're saving diesel, etc. And long term, that one of your clients has done that you're really proud of, that you got them on the right path, Jared. Give me the investor success story brought to you by Jared Cook.
Well, the investor success story. Number one, I invested in myself early on. I was willing to spend the money on my own intellect and knowledge and learning. To Clint's point, spent a lot of time traveling, meeting new people, new courses. I dove into the knowledge to teach and train myself.
Yep.
Consequently, that knowledge now gets to be passed down generation to generation from me to customer to their sons, and so on and so forth. I think that's the big win for me, is the investment in my knowledge has been perpetuated downhill to my customers and whoever else I deal with. And to this group right here, I surround myself with wonderful people that are very intelligent, that can enhance my career and bring new knowledge to the table.
God, that was like a wedding toast right there, Clint. I almost feel like he just over the internet, he just hugged me. I'm going to leave it there because we can't do any better than that. He's Jared Cook. He just hugged us all. And he's joined by Mike Evans.
Right there, buddy.
Clint Freeze. They are, yes, now he's giving us the heart. He's giving us the heart. I haven't seen that since Taylor Swift. Anyway, these guys are with Calibrated Agronomy. If you want to learn more about how you can help your farm, your soil, and get improved agronomic results, we called this long form topic right here, compound interest, managing your soil like a long-term investment. But remember what we also do, we cut these into small bite-sized pieces. So if you don't want to spend a whole 20 or 30 minutes with us, just listen to one of the 2 or 3 minute clips. There's a bunch of them out there. You can find all of this. Where do we find your stuff? You're on LinkedIn, and then you'll send out these links. Where else we find you guys? The soon-to-be website, Mr. Evans?
CalibrateYourAgronomy.com.
CalibrateYourAgronomy.com. Go to LinkedIn. You can go to on Facebook, right? You're on Facebook. You're on LinkedIn. You're everywhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got it. Till next time. That's Clint. That's Mike. That's Jared. I'm Damian Mason, and hope you learned something that can help you improve your farming outcomes here with the Calibrated Agronomy team. Till next time.